While XRP dropped 27% last quarter, Ripple quietly signed a partnership with Swift. Then Schwab, managing $12 trillion in assets, announced they are launching crypto trading. Now I know what you are thinking. Partnerships never move XRP's price. And you are right, they have not. But this time the math is structurally different, and I am going to prove it. Because if you hold any amount of XRP and you do not understand what the Swift integration actually does for cross-border settlement volume, you are going to miss the single biggest catalyst shift since the SEC settlement. In this video, I am going to break down exactly how 3 infrastructure moves are creating a demand pipeline that did not exist 6 months ago, what $12 trillion in new capital access means for XRP liquidity, and why the price is the last thing that moves. Let me set the stage because the context here matters more than most channels are telling you. XRP is trading at $1.31 as of today. That is down 27% for the quarter, the worst Q1 performance in 8 years. Every major partnership announcement Ripple has made in 26 has failed to move the price. Deutsche Bank integration, MasterCard network addition, Hidden Road acquisition, none of them moved the needle on price. So why should you care about the Swift partnership? Because Swift is not just another bank or payment processor. Swift is the messaging backbone for over 11,000 financial institutions across 200 countries. It processes roughly $5 trillion in transactions every single day. That is not a partnership announcement. That is infrastructure access to the largest financial messaging network on the planet. Good Evening Crypto covered this angle and pulled 11,000 views in under 24 hours. Altcoin Daily covered the Schwab side and hit 39,000 views. But nobody has connected these two catalysts into what they actually represent together. The supply side infrastructure from Swift plus the demand side capital pool from Schwab. That convergence is what changes the math on XRP as a bridge currency. Let me show you how. Section 1. What the Swift partnership actually means for XRP volume. Most channels covered this as a headline. Ripple partners with Swift. Great. Next story. But they skipped the mechanism. And the mechanism is everything. Swift currently handles the messaging layer for cross-border payments, but it does not handle the settlement layer. That gap between messaging and settlement is where money gets stuck for 1 to 5 business days in correspondent banking chains. Ripple's entire value proposition since day one has been to collapse that gap. The Swift integration means Ripple's settlement technology can now plug directly into the network that 11,000 banks already use. Banks do not need to adopt a new system. They do not need new compliance frameworks. They do not need new vendor relationships. They can route settlement through Ripple using the infrastructure they already trust. That is the difference between this partnership and every other one Ripple has signed. Let me put this in perspective with actual numbers. Swift processes approximately 42 million messages per day. Each message represents a financial transaction instruction between banks. The average cross-border payment takes between 1 and 5 business days to settle through the correspondent banking system. During that delay, capital sits locked in Nostro and Vostro accounts. Global banks collectively hold an estimated $27 trillion in pre-funded Nostro accounts. Just to facilitate these slow settlements, Ripple's technology settles in 3 to 5 seconds. Here is a number that should stop you in your tracks. If even 1% of Swift's daily $5 trillion volume routes through Ripple's settlement layer using XRP as the bridge currency, that is $50 billion per day in XRP liquidity demand. At XRP's current market cap of roughly $75 billion, that single percentage point would represent a daily volume equal to 67% of the entire market cap. The price impact of that kind of sustained demand is not incremental, it is structural. And here is what nobody else is telling you. This is not speculative. Ripple already processes live transactions through its on-demand liquidity corridors. The Swift partnership does not create new technology. It creates new distribution. It takes proven technology and plugs it into the largest financial network on Earth. Now let me connect the demand side, because supply infrastructure alone is not enough. Section 2. What Schwab's $12 trillion means for XRP access. Charles Schwab manages approximately $12 trillion in client assets across 34 million brokerage accounts. They just announced they are launching direct crypto trading, not through a third party, not through a separate app. Direct integration into the same platform where 34 million people already buy stocks and ETFs. Think about what that removes. Right now, if a Schwab client wants to buy XRP, they have to open a separate crypto exchange account, pass a separate KYC process, transfer funds, learn a new interface, and manage a separate portfolio. Most of them never bother. That friction is the single biggest barrier between traditional wealth and crypto exposure. Schwab just eliminated it. Ask yourself this question. What happens when the buy button for XRP sits right next to the buy button for Apple stock in 34 million accounts? You do not need 34 million people to buy XRP. You need a fraction of a fraction. If 0.1% of Schwab's 12 trillion in assets flows into XRP, that is $12 billion of new demand. The 7-spot XRP ETFs combined have only attracted 1.4 billion in total AUM. 0.1% of Schwab would multiply the entire ETF demand by 8 times over. But it goes deeper than just Schwab. The SAB 131 removal earlier this year means traditional banks no longer face punitive capital charges for custodying digital assets. Schwab is the first domino. Fidelity, Vanguard, and Morgan Stanley are watching. If Schwab's crypto offering attracts clients, every major brokerage will follow within 12 months. That is not speculation. That is competitive pressure in an industry where client outflows are existential. If that math surprised you, hit like right now. Most people have no idea these numbers are this asymmetric. Section 3. The Goldman Sachs signal you cannot ignore. While the Swift and Schwab stories dominated headlines this week, Goldman Sachs quietly filed a document with the SEC revealing $154 million in XRP exposure. Goldman does not take $154 million positions for fun. They take them because their quantitative models identified asymmetric risk-reward. Here is what makes this filing particularly significant. An anonymous account on X posted 2 words 3 days before the filing went public. Goldman Sachs. Then the filing dropped. That sequence suggests institutional coordination, or at minimum informed positioning ahead of public disclosure. Whether you view that as bullish or concerning depends on your perspective. But what is undeniable is that the largest investment bank on Wall Street now has a verified SEC-filed stake in XRP. And Goldman is not alone. Brad Garlinghouse disclosed this week that Ripple executives visited 4 countries in 5 days. South Korea activated a new payment rail integration. These are not press release partnerships. These are operational deployments where real money moves through real infrastructure. The velocity of institutional engagement with Ripple right now is unlike anything we have seen since the company was founded. Combine this with the OCC granting Ripple conditional National Trust Bank approval on April 1st. Ripple is not just a payments company anymore. It is becoming a federally regulated banking entity. Goldman's filing, the OCC approval, the Swift partnership, and Schwab's launch are not isolated events. They are infrastructure being built in parallel. The question is not whether they connect. The question is when. Section 4. Why the price has not moved and why that is actually the signal. I want to address the elephant in the room because I know exactly what you are feeling. You have heard partnership announcements before. Deutsche Bank, MasterCard, Societe Generale, every single one of them was supposed to change everything. None of them changed the price. So why should Swift plus Schwab plus Goldman be any different? Here is the honest answer. Previous partnerships added names to a list. This quarter's developments add plumbing to a system. Swift is not a logo on a press release. It is a functional integration into the payment rails that 11,000 banks use every day. Schwab is not a partnership announcement. It is 34 million new access points to XRP. Goldman's filing is not a tweet. It is a legally binding SEC disclosure. The distinction matters because price follows volume and volume follows access. Until now, XRP has had plenty of theoretical use cases, but limited actual access points for real capital. Swift provides the institutional settlement channel. Schwab provides the retail on-ramp. Goldman provides the institutional validation signal. All three arrived in the same quarter, while the price bled 27%. Look at what happened with Bitcoin. The infrastructure was built through 2023. ETFs were filed, custodial solutions were approved, compliance frameworks were established, and Bitcoin's price did nothing for months while all of that was being assembled. Then the ETFs launched in January 2024, and Bitcoin went from 40,000 to 73,000 in 10 weeks. Infrastructure first, price second, always. That divergence between infrastructure readiness and price is exactly the setup that precedes the largest moves in any asset class. If you want these breakdowns before the mainstream catches on, subscribe and hit the bell. I cover every XRP catalyst daily, so you are never the last to know. Section 5. The RLUSD multiplier nobody is discussing. There is one more piece of this puzzle that ties everything together. Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin has reached $1.56 billion in market cap. It is now the third largest US regulated stablecoin. Every RLUSD transaction that settles on the XRP ledger burns a small amount of XRP as a transaction fee. As Swift integration drives more settlement volume through Ripple's infrastructure and Schwab opens the retail floodgates, RLUSD transaction volume is going to increase. Every one of those transactions makes XRP marginally more scarce. The deflation is small on a per transaction basis, but it compounds. And unlike Bitcoin's halvings, which are predictable supply events, RLUSD-driven XRP burns scale with actual usage. The more the network is used, the more XRP gets burned. The more XRP gets burned, the smaller the circulating supply. The smaller the circulating supply, the more each remaining XRP is worth. Here is what this means for you specifically. If you are holding 1,000 XRP right now, that position is worth approximately $1,310. If the Swift integration captures even a fraction of cross-border settlement volume and Schwab opens the retail floodgates, price models that account for both speculative and utility demand suggest a range of $5 to $12 within 12 to 18 months. 1,000 XRP at $5 is 5,000. At $12, it is 12,000. That is a 4 to 9 times return on a position that costs less than 2 months of rent. The conservative scenario where Clarity Act gets delayed and Schwab rollout is slow still puts XRP in the $2 to $3 range based on ETF inflow momentum alone. The asymmetry is the point. Limited downside, significant upside. That is the kind of setup institutional quant models are built to identify. And Goldman just told you they identified it. With the Clarity Act returning to the Senate Banking Committee on April 13th and markup expected in late April, the regulatory clarity that unlocks institutional adoption at scale is weeks away, not months. The infrastructure from Swift is ready. The capital pool from Schwab is ready. The institutional signal from Goldman is filed. The regulatory path from the Clarity Act is in motion. The only thing that has not caught up yet is the price. If you are holding XRP right now, I want to know your realistic price target for the end of 2026. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and the community predictions are always fascinating to compare with the institutional models. If you found this breakdown valuable, check out my video on what Goldman's $154 million filing actually reveals about institutional positioning. It connects directly to what we covered today.